I always thought the trust fund my grandma left me was safe locked away until I was ready to build my own law firm. But on Christmas Eve, I found out it was gone, vanished. My parents had secretly drained all 4.5 million dollars to bail out my sister. When I confronted them, they didn't apologize. Instead, they blamed me for ruining Christmas. That was the night I realized I wasn't part of a family. I was a wallet with feelings, but I wasn't going to cry. I had a plan, and once it began, there was no turning back. My name is Emma, and I'm a financial attorney living in Chicago. I've always been driven by the idea of independence, of building something on my own terms. Growing up, I wasn't the kind of kid who expected handouts. I worked hard, excelled in school, and dreamed of starting my own law firm one day, specializing in financial law. That dream was deeply tied to something precious my grandmother left me when I was just 5 years old, a $4.5 million trust fund. It was the seed money to launch my career and secure my future. My family on the surface looked picture perfect. We had the house in the suburbs, the annual holiday dinners, and the perfect siblings narrative everyone admired. But beneath that facade was a complicated dynamic, a web of favoritism and resentment that shaped who I was and ultimately what I would become. I have a younger sister, Laura, who's everything I'm not: impulsive, dramatic, and, as I would come to realize, deeply entitled. From an early age, it was clear where my parents' affections lay. Laura was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I was the responsible one, the quiet achiever who never caused trouble, but somehow never earned their praise. Growing up, I buried my feelings. I convinced myself that their love wasn't measured by words or attention, but by the trust fund Grandma set up for me. It was my safety net, my guarantee that no matter what happened, I would have a chance to break free and succeed. I spent countless nights imagining the day I would finally open my own law practice, the office filled with shelves of law books and the hum of dedicated staff. That dream kept me going through law school and the grind of junior associate work. Chicago was my playground and battlefield. The city's mix of old money and new ambition matched my own struggle to carve out a place for myself in a world that seemed to favor connections over merit. Every day was a challenge to prove I deserved what I had: not just the trust fund, but respect and dignity. The holidays were always the hardest. Every Christmas, our family gathered at my parents' house, a sprawling 2-story place in a quiet neighborhood. The house was always decorated impeccably, every ornament placed with care, the smell of pine and cinnamon filling the air. To outsiders, it looked like a perfect celebration, but for me, it was a reminder of everything. I didn't have a real place in the family. Laura was always the star of the show. She'd arrive late, dressed to impress, commanding attention effortlessly. My parents doted on her every whim, whether it was a new designer dress or an expensive trip abroad paid for with the family's money. I, on the other hand, felt like a ghost. Polite smiles forced conversations, and the familiar cold shoulder when I tried to speak up or share my own achievements. Despite it all, I kept quiet. I told myself that my future was bigger than their small-mindedness. The trust fund was my promise of a new beginning, and I guarded that hope fiercely. That was until that Christmas Eve, when everything shattered. The night started like any other family around the table, laughter mingling with the clink of glasses and the smell of roasted turkey and mashed potatoes. But beneath the surface, tension was brewing. I had sensed it for weeks. Subtle remarks from my parents, hushed phone calls, and the way Laura avoided my gaze. When I finally confronted my mom about a sudden financial decision she made, she hesitated before dropping the bombshell. The trust fund was gone. Every dollar of it. At first, I thought she was joking. There had to be some mistake. But as she confessed the truth, that they'd used the money to pay off Laura's massive credit card debt, cover her tuition, and even buy a down payment on a house for her, I felt my world collapse. The money was meant for me, for my future, for the life I had planned for years. And they had given it all away to Laura, without even telling me. I was furious, betrayed. But worse than that, I felt invisible, like my dreams didn't matter at all. When I demanded answers, the facade broke down. My parents turned cold, accusing me of being selfish, of ruining the holiday spirit. Laura, who had once been my sister, looked at me with disdain, as if I was the villain in her perfect story. That Christmas Eve, in front of our extended family, I was accused of greed and ungratefulness. The family I thought I belonged to expelled me emotionally and physically. I was told to leave the house out of their lives. That night, standing outside in the cold Chicago winter, I realized two things. One, my family wasn't what I thought it was, and two, I was going to have to fight for my future on my own terms. The trust fund might have been stolen, but my resolve was not. I decided then that I wouldn't let this break me. I would build my own empire on my own terms, using every ounce of pain and betrayal as fuel. This was just the beginning. After that Christmas Eve, my life changed in ways I never imagined. What was supposed to be a joyful family holiday became the night I faced the harshest betrayal from the people I trusted most. But the shock of finding out my 5 million trust fund was gone was only the beginning. In the days that followed, I made countless calls demanding explanations and answers from my parents. Each time, their tone was colder, more dismissive. They told me again and again that the money was gone and not to question their decisions. It had been used to pay off Laura's debts, cover her college tuition, and even a down payment on a house they bought for her. According to them, Laura was struggling, and this was the family's way of helping her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could they justify this? The money was mine, meant to secure my future, not a blank check to bail out my sister's mistakes. It felt like a slap in the face, a brutal reminder that I was invisible, that my dreams didn't matter. I tried to reason with them, to appeal to the part of them that I hoped still cared for me. I told them about my plans to open my own law firm, how every penny in that trust fund was a stepping stone toward independence. But my words fell on deaf ears. They accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, saying I was ruining Christmas with my anger. The more I pushed, the more they shut me out. Laura, meanwhile, played the perfect victim. She told everyone how stressed and overwhelmed she'd been, how she had no idea about the trust fund, and how the family had rallied around her to help. The story was twisted, painting me as the villain, cold, ruthless, and unfeeling. I was the troublemaker who couldn't be satisfied. The situation escalated quickly. Family members who once smiled politely at me now whispered behind my back. Invitations stopped coming. My phone calls went unanswered. I felt like an outcast in my own home. The breaking point came just a few days before New Year's. During a family gathering, my parents confronted me in front of the whole group. They told me I was no longer welcome, that my attitude had fractured the family and poisoned the holiday spirit. When I tried to defend myself, they shouted over me, calling me cold-hearted and unforgiving. My sister looked on smugly, clearly pleased with the outcome. Then, with no warning, my father grabbed my arm and forced me out the door. The cold winter air hit me like a wall as I stumbled down the steps, humiliated and heartbroken. I stood there in the snow, hearing their voices fade behind me, the front door slamming shut on the family I once called mine. That night was the darkest moment of my life. I wandered the streets of Chicago, numb with shock and disbelief. How could the people who were supposed to love me treat me like this? What did I do wrong? I kept replaying every conversation, every moment, leading up to that night, searching for answers. But there were none. Instead, I realized that my family had made their choice. They sided with Laura, with convenience, with false loyalty, and I was left with nothing. The emotional pain was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, rejected, and utterly alone. But beneath the hurt, a spark of determination flickered. I wasn't going to let them win. My future wasn't over. It was just beginning. I took a deep breath and made a decision. If my family wanted to cut me off, fine. I would build my own path stronger and more successful than anyone ever expected. I would fight not just for the money, but for my dignity, my dreams, and the respect I deserved. That's when I started researching how to use my legal knowledge to challenge their actions. I looked into my rights, the legal avenues available to me, and what I could do to reclaim what was stolen. But I also realized that direct confrontation might not be the best path. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't in lawsuits, but in proving yourself beyond their reach. While the bitterness simmered, I focused on my career. I poured myself into work, taking on more complex cases, and building a reputation for myself in the financial law field. I became known for taking on cases where families betrayed each other, for exposing fraud and manipulation behind closed doors. Over time, my firm grew, and so did my confidence. But the fire of what happened at Christmas never died. I knew Laura's reckless behavior wouldn't go unnoticed forever, and when the time came, karma would catch up with her. Meanwhile, every holiday, every family event was a reminder of the chasm between us. I was the outsider, the person who didn't belong. But I learned to wear that label with pride, using it as motivation. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my identity and proving that I was more than a forgotten daughter or a bank account. I was Emma, the woman who survived betrayal, who turned pain into power, and who refused to be broken. The months following that devastating Christmas were a relentless storm of heartbreak, anger, and bitter realizations. I had lost more than money. I had lost the family I thought I knew, the trust I believed would always be there, and the comfort of belonging. It wasn't just the theft of my $4.5 million trust fund that cut deep. It was the way they had stolen my dreams step by step and then twisted the narrative to make me the villain. The betrayal didn't stop at the money. It seeped into every conversation, every interaction poisoning the very memories I once cherished. At first, I tried to keep my head high. I told myself I would rise above the hurt, that success would be my sweetest revenge. But beneath the surface, the pain festered. Every holiday, every family gathering I was excluded from felt like a fresh wound. The silence from my parents was deafening. Their avoidance was a constant reminder that to them, I was already dead. One night, weeks after I was kicked out, I received a call from a distant relative. Her voice was shaky, almost whispering. She told me Laura had been in trouble again, this time a scandal involving fraudulent financial activities at the company where Laura worked. The details were sketchy, but it was serious enough that the police were involved. Hearing this shattered me in a way I didn't expect. Despite everything, she was still my sister. I remembered the times we played as kids, the rare moments when our laughter filled the house. But more than that, I knew how easily things could spiral out of control when someone was left unchecked. Yet when the news spread, I watched in silence as Laura's world began to crumble. The same family who had defended her unconditionally was now scrambling to cover up the scandal to save their reputation. And me, I was nowhere to be found in their plans. Months passed, and the strain only grew. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It became legal. My parents, in a twisted effort to protect Laura, started accusing me publicly of greed and deceit, alleging that I had mismanaged the trust fund, or worse, that I was somehow involved in the scandal to ruin their family name. I was mortified. People who once called me Emma, the responsible one, now whispered about me as if I was the source of chaos. Friends stopped returning calls. Professional contacts distanced themselves. It was as if my entire world was collapsing piece by piece. But the worst blow came from my own legal battle. I had filed a lawsuit against my parents for the misappropriation of my trust fund. The court battles were grueling, emotionally draining, and financially exhausting. My parents hired aggressive lawyers who painted me as a selfish opportunist, eager to tear the family apart for money. Every hearing felt like reliving the trauma. Witnesses testified about my arrogance and lack of family loyalty. My parents portrayed themselves as victims, claiming they only acted out of love and necessity. Meanwhile, Laura played the innocent, the poor girl who had no clue about the money or the pain she caused. The courtroom was a battlefield, and I was fighting not only for my money, but for my identity, my dignity, and the truth. I was forced to recount the moments of betrayal, the broken promises, and the humiliation of being cast out on that cold Christmas night. Some days, the weight was unbearable. I'd sit alone in my apartment, staring at the empty walls, feeling the crushing loneliness settle in. I missed my parents, not the ones who betrayed me, but the idea of them. I missed the family dinners, the laughter, even the petty fights. What I didn't miss was the pain they caused me. At my lowest, I questioned everything. Was it worth it to keep fighting? Could I really win against the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? Or was I doomed to lose everything? Money, family, and peace. Then came the breaking point. One evening, during a particularly harsh deposition, my father's lawyer unleashed a barrage of accusations insinuating that I was mentally unstable, that my claims were baseless, and that I was only interested in the money. My father sat silently, his eyes cold and unyielding. The words cut deeper than any slap. I looked at my parents, the people who gave me life, who should have protected me, and saw strangers. The love I thought existed was gone, replaced by bitterness and deceit. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the full extent of the betrayal. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my worth, my place in the world, and the family that had abandoned me. But amid the heartbreak, a fierce resolve ignited. I wasn't going to let their lies define me. I refused to be the broken daughter they accused me of being. I doubled down on my work, channeling every ounce of pain into building my legal career. I specialized in family financial disputes, using my experience as fuel to help others facing similar betrayals. The irony wasn't lost on me. My greatest wound became my greatest strength. Meanwhile, Laura's scandal unfolded in the public eye. Her fraudulent activities were exposed, and the once untouchable golden child was now a symbol of disgrace. The house bought with my trust fund money was seized, her credit ruined. My parents faced their own legal troubles, accused of financial mismanagement and complicity. Throughout it all, I remained silent. I refused to gloat or take pleasure in their downfall. My revenge wasn't petty, it was justice. But the emotional scars ran deep. I struggled to trust again, to believe in family or love. The Christmas I once dreamed of was shattered, replaced by a cold reality I had to navigate alone. One night, sitting in my office late after a long day, I found myself writing a letter not to my parents or Laura, but to myself. It read, "You were betrayed, but you survived. You were broken, but you are not defeated. This pain is a chapter, not the whole story." That letter became my anchor, a reminder that while I couldn't change the past, I could shape my future. After months of legal battles and emotional turmoil, I realized that fighting fire with fire wouldn't bring me peace. I had to be smarter, stronger, and more strategic. Revenge wasn't just about hurting them. It was about reclaiming my power and making sure justice was served in a way they would never forget. I started by quietly building my law firm, focusing on family financial fraud and inheritance disputes. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very pain they caused became my specialty, and word spread quickly that I was the go-to lawyer for cases like mine. This was my way of turning the tables, using my knowledge and expertise to expose and stop others from suffering the same fate. But the true turning point came when Laura's scandal deepened. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a pattern of deception, embezzlement, and reckless spending that had been hidden behind my family's polished facade. My parents scrambled to contain the damage, hiring expensive lawyers and publicists, but the truth was unraveling faster than they could manage. Instead of diving headfirst into the chaos, I waited patiently. I watched as their carefully constructed lies began to crumble. Then, when the time was right, I sent a letter to the attorney representing Laura in her criminal case. My name on the envelope was the first shock. They called me immediately, surprised but intrigued. I made it clear I was not there to help Laura. On the contrary, I was prepared to testify against her if it meant exposing the full extent of the family's financial misconduct. This move sent shockwaves through the entire family. My parents were furious. They saw me as a traitor, but I didn't care. I knew the law was on my side, and more importantly, the truth was on my side. In parallel, I launched a public campaign to raise awareness about financial abuse within families, something rarely talked about, but devastatingly common. I gave interviews, wrote articles, and spoke at conferences, sharing my story anonymously at first. The response was overwhelming. Survivors reached out sharing their own tales of betrayal, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. With growing media attention, pressure mounted on my family. Laura's criminal case became headline news, and investigations extended to my parents' financial dealings. Tax authorities opened audits and lawsuits piled up. The house bought with my stolen trust fund money was seized and auctioned off. Through all this, I remained steady. I was no longer the powerless daughter, but a formidable force demanding accountability. My law firm thrived, not just because of my expertise, but because of the authenticity behind my mission. The final blow came during a court hearing where my parents attempted to claim that I had abandoned the family and wasn't entitled to any inheritance or reparations. I stood up calmly and presented evidence they hadn't anticipated: documents proving the misappropriation of my trust fund records, of financial transactions, and testimonies from experts who corroborated my claims. The judge ruled decisively in my favor, ordering my parents to compensate me fully and imposing fines for their misconduct. Laura was sentenced to probation and mandated to undergo financial counseling, her career in ruins. But my victory wasn't just legal. It was deeply personal. I sent a letter to my parents. You took everything from me: my money, my trust, my family. But I took back my future, my dignity, and my voice. This isn't just about money. It's about truth, justice, and finally being free. They never replied. That Christmas, instead of dreading the day I spent it surrounded by friends, I had chosen people who supported me, believed in me, and reminded me what family really meant. Revenge had come full circle, not as a bitter grudge, but as the triumph of resilience and integrity. Years have passed since that painful Christmas, when everything fell apart. I never imagined I would find peace again, let alone happiness. But here I am, stronger, wiser, and free. I never needed their approval or forgiveness. My worth was never defined by their love or acceptance. I built my life on my own terms, brick by brick, fueled by the fire they tried to extinguish. Sometimes I still think about my parents and Laura. The family I once longed for has become a distant memory. But instead of bitterness, I feel gratitude for the lessons, the strength, and the clarity. I keep the letter. I wrote them tucked away, a reminder of how far I've come. You took my trust fund. I built a future no one can steal. That future includes my thriving law firm helping people who have been betrayed just like me. It includes friendships forged through hardship and unconditional support. It includes quiet moments of joy and self-love. Most importantly, it includes freedom. The freedom to choose who I surround myself with, to embrace my truth, and to live without fear. That Christmas night was my breaking point, but it wasn't my end. It was the beginning of a new chapter 1, where I am the author of my own story. And as I look ahead, I know this no matter what comes. I am unbreakable.